Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And just want to start off this episode by thanking our loyal viewers for all the kind comments to the last episode or two where this team has not only snuck into the playoffs, but we've won a wild card series against the Kansas City Royals, and we just recently won a divisional series against the division rival Houston Astros, who took the division from us this year. So despite being the lowest seeded playoff team in the American League this year and having a offense that could be very fairly described as bad, we have made it all the way to the American League Championship Series, where we will be facing the evil empire, the New York Yankees, whose payroll is about 3 times larger than ours. Appreciate all the comments to the last episode about the extensions that we ended up giving to a couple of unproven rookies. Kevin Stubblefield, who had never actually played in the major leagues when we offered him an extension as the playoffs began, and all he has done since he bounced back from an injury that cost him his chance to be a September call-up this year is make quite a mark on these playoffs in the introduction that he has had to Major League Baseball, even though he still does not have a regular season MLB at-bat on his record. But in the playoffs this season, he did end up playing briefly in AAA playoffs for Las Vegas, but importantly, he's 11 for 27 for us. He started 7 of the 8 games that we've played in these playoffs. Actually, that's not true. We've only played 7 games in these playoffs, so he started every game that we played. 400 batting average, a homer, and 2 ribbies, 173 WRC plus. So he is off to an outstanding start in his young career. Jake Ortega, who we also signed to an extension, did not do well in 58 at-bats in the major leagues this year. He did not make the postseason roster either. I know some of you have brought up very good points about what Ortega's future may hold. I think universally people were pretty supportive and excited about the contract extension that we offered to Stubblefield. Ortega, generally positive also. I'd say probably not my four-ply and Samuel Overend the most concerned about the contract. Definitely brought up the issues that he hasn't progressed much over an extended period of time now, and this may be what he ends up with in terms of his bat. I'm still going to be hopeful. I think that this development lab season that will be coming up after the playoffs is going to be critical for him. I think it's very important at the age of 24 this offseason that we get him through a successful program, and still hope that with his combination of outfield range, speed, and a bat that we hope will ultimately be a bit above average, that he could be a very valuable player for us. But I certainly will acknowledge that since Ortega is making more money than Stubblefield, and we can kind of look at those contracts now, 9 years, just under $48 million for Ortega, although the real big money at the end, we have team options, as opposed to the much more reasonable contract for Stubblefield, 10 years, $25 million, again with some outs for us in the bigger numbers at the end. That the Stubblefield contract, just by the fact that it's about half as valuable as Ortega's, probably has a better contract of being a true home run for us. But I still think that the Ortega contract could be a good one. There's a chance that it still could be a great one if he reaches his full potential offensively. The numbers that we have him signed for are very attractive with the rest of his profile. And even if it's a not so great contract, it's not so much money that we won't be able to get out of it. So I feel like with a team like the A's, we have to roll the dice and we have to hit on some of these under market contracts if we really want to build a potential sustained winner. We've talked a lot over the years on this channel, and many viewers have brought up that each win above replacement is worth a few $1,000,000 of salary. But I think that when you're running a team like the A's, that still is a dangerous approach to take, because even if we're getting fair value on the WAR that we're generating, our payroll is going to be literally a fraction of many of the other teams. So if those other teams are getting fair value in terms of WAR on the contracts that they're offering, and they've got payrolls of 100, 150, 200, 250, approaching 300 million, there's just no way that we're going to be able to compete with them if we're getting fair value with a $60 to $90 million payroll. That's still a game that the A's will lose, and it's a losing battle if we do that way. So I think we need to take some gambles on contracts like this and hope that we get into a situation where we're getting a lot of extra value. You know, if Ortega's delivering for WAR when he's making $5 or $6 million a year, that's the type of contract that we need. And if Stubblefield, who I think could be better offensively than Ortega, but given his relatively less valuable defensive positions that he plays and his lack of defense, he's probably not going to be putting up the same kinds of wars that Ortega could. But if Stubblefield's putting up a 3-war season for us while he's making $2 or $3 million, that also is the type of contract that we're going to need to try to make up some of the gap between our Oakland A's and the teams with bigger payrolls, which is, unfortunately for us, still every other team in baseball. So we'll see how these work out, but I think they're the type of gambles that I need to take. I do agree that Stubblefield, certainly on the early returns, seems like a better contract than Ortega, but there are still many years, close to a decade with both of these contracts, for that evaluation to potentially change. Couple other things to check on quickly. We're closing in on having a profitable year, and certainly the fact that we've made it into a third round in the playoffs has been a huge part of that. John Hunter brought up the fact that we might want to consider raising our ticket prices for the playoffs, and I certainly will do that. We're going to raise them $2 to $26 here for the ALCS. We'll have at least 2 games at home, and hopefully, well, I don't know if hopefully more than that. If we can sweep the series in 4 games, I'm fine with there being only 2 games at home, but that may be a bit ambitious. But with 2 home games guaranteed, and the first 2 games being in Yankee Stadium, which I'm sure will be sellouts, I have a feeling we are going to be a profitable team this year when all is said and done, which is real good given the huge bump in our budget, that we've still been able to generate some profitability thanks to this long playoff run that we're going to be continuing in just a few moments. But before that ALCS gets underway, I wanted to tackle one last thing that I brought up at the end of the last episode that many of you opined on, and that was my thought about putting Colt Keith on the roster for Denzel Clark, who through the playoffs thus far has played in only 3 games and does not have a single at-bat. So he's been used as a defensive replacement, pinch runner kind of type. But he is by far our second best defensive center fielder. So by potentially taking Clark off the roster, we would be putting ourselves in a position where if Luis Lara has an injury, we would be needing to use a Chase DeLauder in center field or a Gabriel Gonzalez in center field, who, although he does have 50 range, doesn't really know how to play the position any better than DeLauder. And those are probably the two best options with Clark not on the roster if we need a defensive center fielder. Now, the odds of Lara suffering a significant injury that takes him out for the series are admittedly low, but it still is something that could happen. But when I looked at the team and the fact that everyone on the roster, with the exception of backup catcher Ken Weaver and Denzel Clark, is in the starting lineup against righties or lefties, my inclination was that Clark is the right guy to take off of this playoff roster to make room for Keith. But YME943 brought up the defensive center field point that I've been talking about, and I was initially thinking that that was really good advice, but I was still going to roll the dice and take Clark off the roster because, as I noted, everyone else on the team is starting for us at some point, depending on whether we're facing a righty or lefty pitcher. So I felt like weakening our starting lineup instead of just getting rid of a guy that we're not going to need unless we have some injuries was not the right thing to do. But YME943's putting the thought in my head did get me to go and think about the Yankees a little more specifically. And what I found was that the Yankees do not have a single left-handed pitcher in their entire rotation. So that means that my initial thought that I don't want to mess with anyone except Clark because everyone else is going to be in the starting lineup against somebody is a much less relevant point. And because of that, I am going to keep Clark on the roster because of his defense. And we're going to send down the right-handed hitting Gabriel Gonzalez because he's only in the starting lineup for us against left-handed pitching. And honestly, he did not hit much this year in the major leagues. And he has not hit much this year in the playoffs. So Gonzalez is going to be the guy that we take off of the playoff roster. And that means that we are going to put our friend Colt Keith onto the playoff roster, despite the fact that he's still going to be out with that fractured thumb for hopefully only 5 days. We could potentially have him back for games 5, 6, and 7 of this series. And given that we're not going to be facing any left-handed pitching because the Yankees don't have any left-handed pitching for us to face, I felt like it was pretty unlikely that Gonzalez was going to get much action at all in this series. So I'd rather have the insurance policy in center field with Clark on the team. So thanks to everyone for your thoughts on the contract extensions, for your thoughts on what we should do on the playoff roster. Always helpful to get different perspectives, and it's time for the playoffs to begin. And the Yankees are certainly operating in a different stratosphere of MLB finances than we are. The second biggest budget in all of baseball, the fifth largest payroll, and that is still almost 3 times larger than ours. Astronomical market size, extreme fan loyalty, and very high fan interest. And the Yankees this year had an excellent season. Not just the best record in the American League, but the best record in all of baseball at 101-61, and the only team in baseball with over 100 wins this year. So I don't know if this is quite the David versus Goliath matchup we had in the World Series a couple years ago, when it was our 30th payroll and 30th budget Oakland A's against the first payroll and first budget Los Angeles Dodgers. But it is honestly not too far away from that. And on paper, the Yankees should certainly be favored. Their 101 wins were 16 more than we had. We did split the season series with them. We still obviously have the best pitching staff in baseball, but the Yankees, with the second best pitching staff in the American League, allowed only 11 more runs than we did this year. And the Yankees, with the second best offense in the entire American League, outscored our Oakland A's, who were 13th, by 150 runs this year. So the run differential for the Yankees compared to the A's is 139 better than what the A's put up this year. So certainly going to be a big challenge to win this series. It's probably going to be a big challenge to win more than one game, but we'll find out whether we can do that imminently. Jackson Ferris, our ace, who had a really nice year, 14-5, 2.90 ERA on the mound. He's 0-2 in the playoffs this year, but his ERA is not bad. Myung-Woo Hoo on the mound for the Yankees, the 23-year-old out of South Korea, 8-8 with a 5.07 ERA this year. Right-hander, only throws in the low 90s. Decent profile, although his statistics this year were not particularly impressive. You would hope that us having the lefty on the mound in Yankee Stadium going up against a pitcher who did not have an incredibly imposing season for the Yankees, this might be our opportunity to steal one. And unfortunately, the dream of stealing the first game did not come through. Yankees beat us 3-1. Gunnar Henderson, who I'm sure Orioles fans don't love seeing on the Yankees, and Ben Giddens with the home runs for the Yankees today. Yankees got a run in the second on the Henderson solo shot, added 2 in the third. We got a run back in the sixth, but that was all the offense we could muster. Giddens, Henderson, and of course Jason Dominguez, who's still on the Yankees with the ribbies. Our lone ribby was from Tyler Soderstrom. A respectable but not great game from Ferris. He drops his record to 0-3 in these playoffs. You allowed just 3 hits and 1 walk over 5 2/3 innings. Anthony Volpe injured while running the bases for the Yankees day-to-day with a strained rib cage, so probably won't keep him out of the lineup here in the ALCS. But the Yankees did what they wanted to do, and they won game number 1. Shane Baz, in what could be his final start in Oakland, in his 1 season in Oakland, given the money he's looking for, 9-10 with a 3.81 ERA this year, but 1-0 with a sub-1 ERA in the playoffs. Going up against Hunter Green, 14-6 with a 4.02 ERA for the Yankees. Kind of an odd combination. Led the league in home runs allowed for the second consecutive year, but despite giving up all those long balls, he led the league in whip. So he didn't give up too many hits that weren't home runs. Green has also been good in the playoffs, 1-0 with a 3.24 ERA. We'd love to steal one here in the Bronx, but we're down to one chance to try to do that. We do get the steal, though. Mason Miller, our number 5 starter, gets the win in relief. Soderstrom and our rental second baseman, who also is playing left field for us against righties, Royce Lewis, hit home runs. Tristan Casas and Jordan Lawler with home runs for the Yankees. And boy, if the Yankees have some of these players a few years in the future, that will certainly mean that Hal Steinbrenner will have opened up his wallet. Taking a look at the box score, traded runs in the second, added a run in the third. The Yankees actually stormed back to tie it in the fifth, tied it again in the sixth after we scored a run, but a 3-run seventh with a 3-run homer from Soderstrom is what broke things somewhat open for us. 3 hits today from Chase DeLauder, a couple from Sajasi, couple from Arakawa as well. Arakawa, Rincon, both with 2 ribbies. Obviously, Soderstrom with the 3-run home run led the team on that front. Hit from the youngster Stubblefield. Boz, I'm guessing he got hurt, injured while pitching, and then a rain delay of 77 minutes. Mild oblique strain for Boz, not the end of the world, but he still would be lined up to go in game number 6. The positive thing is that if there is a game number 6, it'll be after an off day. And we really need the off day tomorrow, because with Boz only throwing 6 pitches for us, we ended up using 7 different arms out of the bullpen. So we are going to need to get these guys some rest, and we're also going to need to be thinking about who might be able to start game 6 for us if we decide to be real conservative with Boz. I tend to think, since it's a minimal impact on throwing, probably let him start with a short leash and hope that a guy like Miller, who certainly can start, is somewhat rested if we need him to come in and pitch a lot of innings for us. So we've got the W, which is positive because, one, we are heading home to Oakland tied in the series 1-1 rather than down 2-0. But that guarantees that even in a worst-case scenario, we're getting 3 more home dates in Oakland. And as we sit here following those first couple games against the Yankees, we've already gotten to profitability this year. So that's a very positive sign in terms of us hopefully not just keeping our job, but also putting ourselves in a situation where our budget hopefully won't get cut back next year. And who knows, maybe with the success we're having, we'll get a boost. Although when we won the World Series, he cut us back. And last year, when we had the worst year we've ever had in Oakland, he gave us a big increase in the budget. So one thing you cannot say about Mr. Fisher is that he is predictable. And before we get the home game started, check in on Colt Keith, and looks like he's 2 days away from that fractured thumb being healed, so it's conceivable that we may have him for Game 5 of this series on Saturday, and certainly he could be an absolute difference maker for us with his bat. Borderline MVP season for him this year, led the league in ribbies, and the fact that we have gone at this point 6-3 thus far in the playoffs without Colt Keith in the lineup is I don't know that I'd say it's miraculous, but it is certainly quite surprising. And as we get ready for a critical Game 3, another matchup of some pitchers who have done well in the playoffs this far. Alfredo Magana on the mound for the Yankees, 27-year-old starter, a pretty impressive profile, outstanding control, and a really nice 5-pitch arsenal. 17 and 12 with a 3.22 ERA. He was a free agent signing out of Cuba this past offseason. Was a guy that we looked at and talked about. Had a excellent introduction to Major League Baseball this year. Led the league in innings pitched, walks per 9 inning, and strikeout to walk ratio while putting up a 6.1 WAR. Was a player that we couldn't afford, although honestly in retrospect with the nice bump that we got coming out of the preseason, we probably could have made things work with him, with hindsight being 2020, but was not really a realistic option at the time. Chase Burns, a guy that we traded for this past offseason, 8 and 6 with a 3.46 ERA during the playoffs, throws close to triple digits consistently and hits 100 plus at times. We'll see if Oakland can take the lead in this series here in game number 3. And we cannot. And unfortunately, Chase Burns, a day-to-day injury, mild shoulder inflammation, recovery expected to take a week. So that is a bit of a problem, simply because now our Game 6 and our Game 7 potential starters are both in jeopardy. Now, we don't get to a Game 6 or a Game 7 unless we win one of these next two, but we probably have to start planning a little bit for some shuffling of the pitching staff towards the end of this series. I've got an idea, but want to kind of take a look at the box score first in this 4-1 loss. And the weak offense is definitely coming back to haunt us a bit with 2 games where we've scored only 1 run in this series. Yankees jumped on us early with 3 runs in the first, Volpe with a double and Lawler with a 2-run single, and they weren't going to need much more than that. 5 hits for our team, all singles. Burns only went 3 innings. Romano, Miller, McGill, and Vesia on in relief. And I don't love the fact that we ended up using Miller, because he's now pitched pretty significant innings 2 of the last 3 days. I feel like we should be able to push Boz back to a potential game number 7. But Joe Rock only pitched 2 days ago, and we are actually going to bench Boz for the next few days. It's certainly weakening our bullpen a bit for these next couple games, but if we get to a game 6, that'll allow us to have Rock on the mound, and then Boz should be ready to go for game 7, because Chase Burns with that mild shoulder inflammation is not going to be ready to go for game 7. But if we're fortunate enough to get to a World Series, he'll be ready to go then. There's probably an argument you put Burns on the playoff IL and you just suck it up and deal with not having him in the World Series, but I think our bullpen is deep enough that we can handle a little less flexibility. Although honestly, this injury to Trevor McGill with a moderate impact on his throwing for the next 1 to 2 weeks is a little bit more of a concern for me than even the injury to Boz, because McGill did a really nice job as our closer after we brought him over with a 2.13 ERA in 25 1/3 innings. But I don't know how I can feel real good about putting a guy with a strained elbow and a moderate impact on his throwing out there. And he's going to be gone 1 to 2 weeks. So to me, there's more of an argument to put him on the playoff IL and bring up a fresh arm to help our bullpen. And I'd hate to not have him for the World Series, but with that 1 to 2 week injury, there's no guarantee that he's even going to be around for the World Series. And we felt like we needed a fresh arm, so we did put McGill, who's going to be out for 1 to 2 weeks, onto the playoff IL. So that means he is not eligible for the World Series. Brought up Levi Sterling, the youngster who was pretty solid for us, a 3.07 ERA with 20 strikeouts in 14 2/3 innings after he finally made his major league debut this September. I felt like we just needed a fresh arm and an arm that wasn't injured, particularly with the fact that we're now going to be sitting Joe Rock and not able to use him out of the pen these next couple days. We'll see if we can win at least one of these 2 games at home and get to a day off and push the series back to the Bronx. Definitely no guarantees that that's going to happen. And the game does not seem to want to let me finish today. I was going to try to go with live, quick-hitting action here. Don't give myself time to think, just react to what's going on. And unfortunately, gave me a lot of time to think. Jordan Hicks on the mound for the Yankees, 13-5 with a 3.60 ERA. Another pretty well-known name that ends up on this high-priced Yankees roster. We're going with the former Yankee, Jason DeCaro, who we picked up when we traded away the reigning Cy Young winner, Bubba Chandler, about 1.5 years ago. Was 15-9 for us. Led the team in wins, although he was working out of the bullpen in the first 2 series of the playoffs for us. But 15-9 with a 3.94 ERA. And DeCaro has an opportunity to make the Yankees pay for trading him away 1.5 seasons ago. Not to be the case, though. Another 4-1 loss for us in the Bronx. So we are down 3-1 to the Yankees. And as I noted, we had that 9-run outburst in game number 2, which we won, but just a single run in either of these first 3 games. But the good news is that we should be able to get Colt Keith back in the lineup for this pivotal game number 5 in Oakland. Lawler and Dominguez with home runs for the Yankees. Only 4 hits for the Athletics. Scored our lone run in the bottom of the 9th, run-scoring single from Royce Lewis. But when you get only 4 hits and the starter only gives up 1 over 7 innings, it's generally going to be hard to win. DeCaro, 10 hits, 3 earned runs over 6 innings. Technically was a quality start despite all those hits he gave up. He didn't walk anybody. Vesia and Levi Sterling pitched for us. Vesia gave up a run, but with the fact that we're not scoring, wasn't really going to matter whether he gave up a run or not. So we're going to, before we move forward to the next day, tweak our rosters. Actually, we'll move forward to the next day and just ensure that Colt Keith is actually healthy and ready to go. And looks like it's going to be the case. So we are going to get Colt Keith into the lineup here for what could be the final game of the season here in Oakland in game number 5 against the Yankees. And we had an interesting decision to make. there were several guys that we thought about taking off of the roster. Royce Lewis, Kevin Stubblefield, Hideki Arakawa. But to make room for Colt Keith at third base, we ended up taking Thomas Saggese off of the roster. He hasn't been great in the postseason. His numbers are decent, but they have not been impactful. He's hitting .302, which sounds great, but he's only walked once, and he's only got 3 extra base hits, and he's only actually driven in 1 run. So he's been a slightly below average offensive player for us. I think there is an argument to go more bat heavy and maybe have taken out Hideki Arakawa for him and then move Saggese to second, but that would weaken our defense, and Arakawa is a left-handed hitter. He has not been good in the playoffs. I admit that, with a .161 batting average, but I'm going to go with the fact that he's a lefty facing against a right-handed pitcher. I'm going to go with the fact that with Baldwin at catcher, Arakawa and Rincon at second and short, and Lara in center field, we're as strong up the middle as we can possibly be for this game. I get the fact that we've only scored 1 run in 3 of these games, and more offense is what we need. But my hope is that by getting Colt Keith in the lineup, he may be the jolt that we need offensively. A rematch of game number 1 with you against Ferris, and although we lost that one, the 3-1 loss was the closest we've been in these 3 games that we've lost in this series. Will this be the final gasp for the Oakland A's here in this 2031 season? Or can we win what may be the final game at home and send ourselves to a Game 6 in New York? And we do get the 7-2 victory. Ferris finally earns his first win of the playoffs. Dominguez and Soderstrom both with their second homers of the series. A 7-2 win. So the crazy thing is, although we are down 3-2, and we've scored only 1 run in each of those 3 losses, we've actually outscored the Yankees in this series. It's just that scored 16 runs in 2 games that we won when we didn't need nearly that much after allowing just 6, but can't score at all in the close games where we're holding the Yankees down as well, but they're holding us down even more. Taking a look at the box score, we jumped out early. Soderstrom with a 2-run double in the second. DeLauder and Keith with run-scoring hits in the third. Opened up a 5-0 lead for the A's, and we never looked back. Colt Keith, 1 for 5 with a ribby in his first action. Arakawa was 0 for 4, dropping his batting average to 143 for the playoffs, but we still got the W. Ferris, 4 hits, 3 walks, 5 strikeouts, 1 earned run over the 5 innings. As we mentioned, finally earned his first win of the playoffs in his 4th start. Romano and Sterling out of the bullpen. And we will be heading back to New York. And you can see our profitability on the year now over $6 million. And we've still got at least 1 more game of our portion of the gate receipts in the Bronx before this season might be over. And as we get ready for game number 6, we've actually been able to tweak the rotation a little bit. Chase Burns still injured day-to-day with that shoulder inflammation, moderate impact on his pitching, and he's going to miss these next 2 games, so he is not an option. But Shane Baz looks like he's going to be ready for game number 6 here, so we are going to put him in that role. And Mason Miller actually didn't end up getting used at all in the last couple of games that we played. So we're actually going to move him into the rotation to be our potential Game 5 starter or Game 7 starter if needed on normal rest tomorrow. We obviously haven't used Joe Rock since we were resting him to keep him ready to potentially pitch here in Game 6, but the fact that we can go to two more proven starters in Boz and Miller, who were both in our rotation all year, and we'll have Rock back and available in the bullpen, I think hopefully will give us our best option of trying to win these last two games. Certainly not a high probability scenario for us to do that, but we've got a chance on paper. And we've got Boz, who's had a sub-1 ERA in the playoffs this year, on the mound against Hunter Green. And unfortunately, we've lost our fourth game of the series, and perhaps not unexpectedly, we scored only one run in each of our four losses. This was the closest one, a 2-1 loss. Chase DeLauder, who was our ALCS and World Series MVP back in 2029. I know several of you were hoping he was going to have a big year for us in the playoffs this year. Finally hits his first home run of the season, but it is in our final game of the postseason here. Jordan Lawler, your ALCS MVP for the Yankees. Taking a look at the box score, all the scoring was in the sixth. The Lauder with the solo home run. The Yankees came back in the bottom of the sixth. Lawler walked to drive in a run, and then a run-scoring single by Dominguez. And both of those came off of Mr. Rock, the left-handed reliever that we had been saving to potentially start this game. So he blew the save. Boz took the loss. Not a bad start from Boz. 3 hits, no walks, 2 earned runs over 5 1/3 innings. But a little bit too little, too late for our Oakland A's. And the season is over here on October 27th, 2031. When all was said and done, still a surprisingly good run for these A's. As I mentioned at the start of the episode, we were the third and final wild card in the American League. 85-77 record. So we got the winning record that we needed to have this year. We ended up making the playoffs, and we were the underdogs in all 3 of our series, and we happened to win the first 2 of them. So certainly the second most successful season that we've had here in Oakland. Always hate to feel like you're close to maybe getting to or winning a World Series and come up short, but I can't really be disappointed with how this season went. And it's crazy. You know, we scored only the 1 run in each of the 4 losses to the Yankees, and they were all pretty close games. And despite losing that series 4-2, we still actually outscored the Yankees 20-19 in the series. So can probably say that we got a little bit unlucky. Certainly scoring only 1 run in each of our 4 losses is going to make me concerned about the offense and make me second guess perhaps not getting Arakawa out of there and trying to get a little more help over those last couple of games. But if you had told me we were going to outscore the Yankees in this series, certainly would expect that we would be sitting here at worst at 3-3 through game number 6 rather than down 4-2. But those are the breaks. The season is over for the Oakland A's, and now it is just a matter of finding out whether the Cubs or the Mets will be facing off against the Yankees in the World Series. We're either going to get last year's World Series champions, the Cubs, an opportunity to go for a repeat with the 2 top teams in baseball facing off against each other, or we're going to get the first Subway Series in 31 years between the Yankees and the Mets. And a Subway Series it will be, as the Mets took out the defending World Series champions 4-3 in the National League Championship Series. So a really fun season is finally finished for the Oakland A's. Made it all to the way to the ALCS. So second playoff appearance in the past 3 years, second winning record in the past 3 years. The hope is that with getting some of that young talent signed up with the likes of Misters Ortega and Stubblefield, we may be able to, over the longer term, solve some of these offensive issues that have long plagued this Oakland franchise. But have to feel optimistic about the future after the way this season went. We will find out what our budget's going to look like for next year in our next episode. We're also going to take a look and recap the season before we play through the World Series, take a look at some of our top and bottom performers, both on the pitching staff and as far as our everyday players, and start thinking about what our plan for the offseason should be, because with the financial limitations that we do have here, there's always going to be tough decisions that need to be made. But the hope is that after achieving the winning record this year, getting the team all the way to the ALCS, and through that long playoff run, eventually earning close to $9 million, that hopefully we'll have a budget similar to the $150 million that we had this past year, which was by far the most money that Mr. Fisher has ever given us to play with in this playthrough. And we'll find out the answer to what our budget looks like next year, as well as the answer to who wins the Subway Series in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.